It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. And we begin here at home as Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Maitama Tugar, arrived in Niamey on Wednesday, leading a high-level delegation aimed at restoring and strengthening diplomatic relations between Nigeria and the Republic of Niger. The visit marks a significant step in mending ties strained since the July 2023 coup in Niger. Tugar is expected to deliver a special message from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to General Abdurrahman Chiani, the head of state of Niger Republic. The Nigerian delegation includes senior diplomats, policy advisors, and defense liaison officers. Discussions are currently ongoing, anticipated to cover critical issues such as security cooperation, regional trade, economic development, and cross-border collaboration. This diplomatic engagement reaffirmed Nigeria's commitment to peaceful dialogue and regional stability. Certainly a step in the right direction. This is the type of discourse that we want to see at FME.
Oh, I definitely agree. I think that when we're looking at the West African situation, especially with the likes of Niger, Burkina Faso, and I forget the third West African country, Mali, who not only have left ECOWAS, but have shifted away from democracy as a unit and shifted towards their military leadership. So to see, especially Niger and Nigeria communicating in this way, I think it sets a wonderful example for bilateral ties and for the ability to re-strengthen relationships even during tense times. You know, there were very serious allegations coming from Niger towards Nigeria when it comes to accusations of them saying that Nigeria is colluding with France or using its relationship with France to share intelligence or to hurt the Nigerian people. So I do think that this is a great example of our federal government, our foreign ministry looking at ways in which Nigeria can continue to be a leader in the region by outstretching its hands as much as it can. What I do hope, and I do think many people are hoping for, especially if you're in the business of the benefits of democracy, is that there'll be some situation where they come back into the fold, perhaps come back into ECOWAS. It might be a little too much to do in too little time, but I do think that this is going to be met with a lot of optimism. And I do hope that the relationship between the two countries, neighboring countries, will definitely strengthen off the back of this visit.
Absolutely.
So we have very, very strong ties between Nigeria and Niger because of the proximity. Because of the insecurity, there are a lot of Nigerians that still go to sleep in Niger. Every day they work in Nigeria, they go to sleep in Niger. And in fact, in 1971, we had a Nigeria-Niger, joint commission. We've done a lot together. We exchanged ties. The former president of this country was quoted to have said, he's got relatives out there in Niger. And that's why when the approach of President Tinubu was first to sort of like invade Niger, based on a security report that was released and that was, put out there, where in fact we had actually amassed troops and said we should go in there and have airstrikes when the coup first happened. We said it was not a good decision, and the National Assembly also did stand tall. Probably the only time that the National Assembly did go against President Tinubu in recent time. And all of that continued. There were protests in the north. The Nigerians were playing hardball, and finally, some relationship started when Emir of Kano, Emir Sanusi, was allowed to go in there to see the leaders. And finally, we've been having conversation. And this is a welcome development. The our foreign minister is getting into Niger, having conversations about, border trade, because we do supply about over 70% of electricity to Niger. That has been stored greatly because, there were sanctions and embargo at a point. Trade, they have said they're going to levy some taxes on us trade coming in. They have gone to join something called the AES, Association of Sahelian Nations, Burkina, Mali, and Niger, and all of that. Let's see how that pans out. The president recently has consolidated himself, saying he's going to be there for the next 5 years, which I think is very wrong, which I think should not be given legitimacy, in as much as we want to have conversations and trade and all of that with them, because they are neighbors pretty much. We're interwoven, through the border. We should also not give legitimacy to cruel military dictators, because all they do is they use absolute power to perpetrate their dictatorship, and that's what they have been doing. Even in the case in Burkina Faso, the leader that everybody praises is suppressing journalists' rights and all of that. So despite the social media propaganda that comes out of Burkina Faso, that Burkina Faso is now some form of Manhattan with all the developmental projects, rights of people are still being suppressed. So, but this is a good measure. Because we also need partnership in terms of security, the fight against Boko Haram. We used to all be part of that, Sahelian security body, to be able to fight, because we have this terrorist group also making attacks into Niger and also making attacks into Nigeria. So we need all of that conversation. Let's see how this will yield fruitful results for both countries.
Absolutely. Now, this is not the first of diplomatic engagements that we would see taking place between these two nations. Of course, we remember that former head of state, General Abubakar, also made a trip to Niamey recently in a bid to try and foster more cordial ties between the two nations. Now, if we dial back in history just a little bit, as much as the decline in relations peaked in 2023, June of 2023, when there was a coup in Niger, there was a development of frosty relations under former President Muhammadu Buhari when borders were closed. Now, of course, you can just imagine the people on either side of the border are the same people. They are one group, they are family. So this caused tension, as it would, expectedly. However, we've moved on from this now, and we're trying to move into a new era where we figure out how to cohabit with our neighbors. Nigeria cannot afford to be isolated, whether it be economically, diplomatically, or from a security perspective. Niger holds the largest land border with Nigeria. And of course, we also know that Nigeria still needs access to the markets in Niger. Although in the past, historically, a lot of this was done illegally through porous borders and through black market trade, smuggling, and so forth. The conversation now needs to be formalized as to how all of this can be mitigated, how a partnership and bilateral relations can formalize these relations that culminated in 2023. The statistics say that bilateral trade between the two nations was up to $200 million. This has declined significantly to just $60 million. However, you can see that there's still a persistence, there's still a huge potential that can happen there. Now, what are some of the major projects and some of the major breakthroughs that were discussed yesterday? Well, there was a renewed commitment to renew the Niger-Nigeria Joint Commission, which of course is the joint commission that oversees relations on projects that affect both countries. Under this, we'll see conversations around the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline. Now, we discussed this at length yesterday during our business segment, as we were talking about gas and getting Nigeria's gas out and the importance of a trans-Saharan gas pipeline. We already know there were stories and headlines about fuel shortages in Niger just last month, and Nigeria had to come and bail out her neighbor. So Niger does need our oil for some of their refineries. Though they have smaller refineries, they need our oil, and they need our finished product, our petroleum as well, to oil that economy. The Trans-Saharan Highway, of course, another economic gateway, Trans-Saharan Fiber Optic, and the Kano-Katsina-Jibia-Maradi Railway. Now, all of these are projects that in isolation of one country as a Nigeria or a Niger, they are almost meaningless. That bilateral cooperation needs to exist in order for these, for some of these projects to come to fruition and for both people on both borders to be able to enjoy the fruits of these initiatives. Now, on a security perspective, we're still battling, we're still trying to understand and unpack some of the resurgence of violence and outbreaks of terrorist attacks here in Nigeria. But one thing you find in common when you look at whether it's Borno or whether it's Plateau State, when you read some of the reports, one thing that is held in common is the fact that many of the people are saying that the terrorists and the criminals who are involved in this, many of them are not speaking Nigerian languages. Many of them are speaking French, for example. Now, this goes to show the importance of bilateral cooperation between Nigeria and Niger, because we know that a lot of the extremists are filtering in from the rest of the Sahel region. Now, of course, Adefemi and Rufai have already alluded to the cooperation that the Alliance of Sahel States have already created for themselves, including a military force and so forth. But just because Sahel States exist does not mean that there can't be a collaboration between ECOWAS and the Sahel States in the interest of security in the region. So we continue to watch this and continue to hope that these relations are deepened and that we can continue to foster healthy, amicable, friendly relations with our brothers and sisters across the border. Well, Ahead of the 2027 elections, prominent leaders of the defunct Congress for Progressive Change, now fused into the All Progressives Congress, have unanimously reaffirmed their loyalty to the APC and expressed their full support for President Bola Tinubu's administration. At a meeting in Abuja, they underscored their commitment to the party's unity and the success of Tinubu's administration. The meeting was attended by many politicians, including a former governor of Nasarawa State, Tanko Almakura, and former governor of Katsina State, Aminu Bello Masari. The leaders emphasized their dedication to fostering party unity, resolving internal challenges, and ensuring that the APC remains a formidable force in Nigerian politics. A former minority leader of the House of Representatives, Farouk Aliyu, yesterday accused the ex-governor of Kaduna State, Nasir al-Rufai, of self-centeredness, especially in his recent attacks on President Bola Tinubu. Aliyu maintained that the Congress for Progressive Change, that's the CPC, a bloc within the APC, has intention of pulling out of the ruling party, contrary to insinuations in the public space. Right, so those are other developments happening in local politics.
I mean, I think this is a good example of how there's like really no smoke without fire. So while he can say that, oh, you know, perhaps, oh, there's no such talk about that, the CPC guys are loyal to the president, there definitely was some form of a shift there. And if we're breaking this down to ethnicity and marginalization, I think it's clear to understand why. The CPC was a party really that was built on or around the former President Muhammadu Buhari. And so what we see is the modern day iteration of it, which is come into the APC and created what we now know of this party. And clearly the sentiment was there was some discord within members of the CPC because they felt as though President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's presidency as it stands now is one that prioritizes Yoruba and Lagosians to some extent, and one that they don't feel does enough to address these types of concerns. So I do think that there was a legitimate move or plan for these chiefs or people within this bloc to break away from the APC, despite the fact that we're now hearing that they're choosing to remain loyal. But if their concerns aren't addressed directly, I do think that this is something that we'll be talking about in the near future.
So I think this is a really direct jab at Nasir el-Rufai, because since he did not get his ministerial position, he's been upset and
He
being
said
upset.
It's not about that, though.
I mean, what do you
He said it's
expect?
not
What do you
about
expect him to say? Everybody backs a campaign for specific reasons. One of it, normally, rule of thumb, is the fact that you also get something in return. President Tinubu, like Nasir el-Rufai did say rightly, begged him to come. And he said yes. And he worked for that campaign. But in the end, he couldn't get that position because whatever reason might have gone on happened. He has a right to be upset. But the same thing he complains about today, President Tinubu, a lot of people say you can't justify your complaint because you sold the same candidate. So part of the things he said was the fact that, some splinter block of the CPC, they are saying that we are not leaving. And we all know that the APC was formed by an agglomeration of APGA, PDP, ACN as it was then, and parts of the CPC. Everybody pretty much brought their own things in. President Buhari had run on the CPC at some point in previous elections before they had this APC. So they are saying that we are not going anywhere. We can see Osita Akichukwu that comes on this show most of the time and says, we came in from the Buhari bloc. They are saying we are loyal. So they are saying we do not understand what Mr. el-Rufai is saying, that bloc says they're going to leave. So you can see the way politics is playing out. And the question that will constantly haunt Mr. el-Rufai, I'm sure he's going to be tired of hearing that question now, is if he had gotten that position, if he had served in this government, will he still be asking this question, or will he have resigned? Okay, I'm just being told this professor, okay, Chikuta is coming.
Yes.
So that's it. But all of this is in and around the politics they want to play in 2027, the politics of coalition, which I think largely, and mark my words, that the way they are going about it is not firm enough. And they might make it easier for President Tinubu to emerge in 2027. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar has been talking in his own right. Yes, we are trying to bring people together and all of that. But the various parts that need to come together in the coalition, they've not answered one formative question of who is going to be presidential candidates. If Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, he has a right to run, wants to be on that ballot, a lot of people will be disgruntled. Because him being on that ballot in the first place was what split about the PDP. I do not subscribe to the way Minister Wike behaved about it, because through and through you must be a party man. But there's a part to his grouse that is valid. So since they are not ironing this matter out, it's 2025, you have elections in 2 years. I do not think they'll be able to come. I might be wrong.